Okay, today we are doing trig graphs, but we're discussing their equations. So we're doing sine and cosine graphs, and we're going to find all those parts we talked about yesterday, but from the equation. So this is one equation that we often use. Okay, it's got an A, B, C, and D. Same deal with this one. It's slightly different, and we're going to be using that also. Not a big difference between the two, but they're all good. Now, this could also be a cosine graph because they are so similar. You just put the word cosine in there and it's a cosine graph. So they all work the same way, all the parts. So we have our amplitude. So these are the different parts we're going to find. Amplitude is your A. Sometimes it's negative, so the amplitude is always positive. If A is negative, that means there was a reflection through that midline, like in the last graph, last video. The period is 2 pi over your B, so that's B. That's why I picked B when we did the stuff yesterday. So that's that. Frequency between 0 and 2 pi. So that means how many cycles occurred between 0 and 2 pi. Well, that's B. Your midline is D, or Y equals D. So that's also known, in midline, it's also the vertical shift. That's whatever. Okay, horizontal shift. Well, this is where these two equations differ. So the horizontal shift, if you're using this equation here, oops. Okay, if you're using this equation right here, where the B is outside from the X. Okay, sometimes the parentheses are right here, and sometimes they aren't. We're mostly going to see it with them, so I just wanted to, you to see them. This B here is separated from the X by a parenthesis. So when that happens, the horizontal shift is just C, negative C. Remember, we're moving X, so it's a horizontal left and right movement. Anytime you're moving left or right, C is always that opposite sign. So over here, if it's an any, so that means the B is connected to the X directly here, then it's negative C over B. You technically have to factor out that B. So that just means it's negative C divided by B, and that's how much it moved to the left or to the right. Range, I shouldn't have circled it here, but the range is just the amplitude plus the diameter. If you picture, the range is always the up and down. The amplitude stretches it, stretches it up and down or shrinks it. So that changes that. And the D takes the whole graph and shoves it up or down. So those are the only, A and the D are the two things that affect the range, and that's how we figure it out from there. It's pretty, just have to remember that. So looking at this, can we find these things from specific examples? So let's go here. All right, so here we go. What's the amplitude? Well, the amplitude is the absolute value of A. So it's 3. The period is 2 pi over B. Well, B is the thing that's closest to the X there. And so 2 pi over 2, so that would just be pi. The frequency between 0 and 2 pi, well, that's just that guy. The horizontal shift, well, this is where you have to decide, is the 2 right next to the X, or is it separated by a parenthesis? Well, in this case, it's connected to the X directly, so I have to change the sign of the 4, so it's a positive 4 over 2. All right, so when it's an any, you have to do that dividing. Vertical shift, well, that's your D, the vertical shift, so that would be up 4. I guess technically this one, horizontal shift, would be to the right. Not my right and my left are not my strong suit. So that's 2 to the right. This is 4 up. The midline is just your vertical shift, so it's Y equals 4. And the range, we just take the 3 and we make this -3, and we add the d. And then we take the +3, and we add the d. So -3 plus 4 is 1, and 3 plus 4 is 7. So the range here is 1 to 7. That is all. So the only difference between that one and this guy is that in this case, the b is an outie this time. The b is outside the parentheses. So that's going to change how we figure out the horizontal shift. And the other difference is sometimes they put the d in front as opposed to over there. Just notice if it's got a 5 plus or minus anything, this 5, that's your vertical shift. Okay? It's not your amplitude. Your amplitude is what's multiplied times that cosine or the sine. So right there, in that case, it's going to be 1. So the amplitude is 1. The period is 2 pi over b. So this is a 2 here. That's your b. The frequency between 0 and 2 pi, well, that's just that 2. The horizontal shift, all I need is that number. It's -pi over 2. In other words, it would be pi over 2 to the left. You can write it either way. It's basically the same thing. And then the range, it's negative the amplitude plus the d, positive the amplitude plus the d. So this one would be 4 to 6. All right, enjoy.